ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's time for What Do You Call It? Podcast.
Greetings and salutations. It's another episode of What Do You Call It? Podcast. I'm your host, GB, and today's guest is the earthquaking, pillar shaking leader of the Meat Pop Express. Please welcome Big Trouble Ben Bishop. How are you doing today, mate? You all good?
I'm doing great, George. Feeling good across the pond here in the States. Beautiful day out, about 90 degrees today here in Maryland. I'm loving it. And really happy to be on this podcast. I'm so happy you reached out. Can't wait to get it going, talking to you. Really excited.
Right, thank you for coming on, mate. I actually discovered you because of my first guest, James Ellsworth. So basically, he was the first person I've ever had in the podcast. And he actually mentioned you. And I'm not saying this for branding points, and I'm not saying this as a cheap plug, but if you go back and watch the first episode, he mentions you. And it was actually in the notes. I actually did want to know because as he did have nothing but good words to say about you and to keep an eye on you. How was he, like, first impressions, and also how has he been as a mentor?
That's funny. I like hearing that. Jimmy put me over a little bit because he's very honest, and he'll let me know when, hey, you better pick it up or you better figure this out, and that's good. That's good to hear. I'm excited about that. So, Jimmy, if you're listening, thank you. Ellsworth. Honestly, I owe a lot to him just to get started. He's done a lot for me, especially in my wrestling career. Let me tag along with him to a lot of places, especially getting my feet wet, especially during the pandemic where not a lot of places were running, and he was getting booked. And he was nice enough to say to a lot of promoters, hey, I got this guy close to 7 feet tall, show him some pictures of me. He's like, could you use him? Could you get him on your show? And he was able to work a lot during the pandemic because of that. My first impression of him was pretty funny. I just went to one of his shows, ACW, Adrenaline Championship Wrestling here in Maryland. And I was just kind of standing there. This was back in 2019. I was just standing around, and Gilbert actually came up to me, Dwayne Gill, and said, hey, are you a worker? And I was just like, yeah, well, I have a job. I got a job. And he's like, no, man. Are you a worker? Are you a wrestler? Yeah. So I like, no, I've always wanted to be, but I just never knew how to get into it. I just kind of, I was an athlete. I played basketball. I played Australian football, but I never got into, I always loved wrestling, but I never knew how to get into wrestling. And I thought that passed me by. I was at the time 29 years old. So I was like, I think I'm, I think probably it. I don't have a chance to do it. But he's like, no, man, come here. I got to introduce you to Jimmy. So I don't know who Jimmy is. So he walks me up to Ellsworth. I knew Ellsworth because I follow wrestling, so I knew who he was from his run in WWE. Yeah. And immediately he was just like, "Oh man, we got to get you going. We got to get you training. We got to do this, and this. Here's my number. This." It was like kind of a whirlwind. I went out with him that night and talked to him more. And the next day, I was literally helping set up the ring in Hanover, Pennsylvania, and trained for about an hour. Learned how to take a bump. Learned how to run the ropes a little bit. The day after that, started training more, and just kind of trained my ass off for a while until my first show in February 2020. So since then, just been trying to work as much as possible. Obviously, with the pandemic, it's been tough, but I just you gotta make good out of a bad situation. I couldn't just throw a pity party for myself. So luckily, and I've been very fortunate to kind of hitch onto Ellsworth, and go where he goes and meet people and work as much as possible.
Just to backtrack there, so just to sort of rewind the clocks back a little bit, as you mentioned that you did love wrestling, but you didn't exactly know how to get into wrestling. Who were some of your favorites as a tall person? Did you find yourself attracted to the tall wrestlers like Diesel and Undertaker and Kane?
Yeah, so Kevin Nash is my favorite wrestler of all time. I actually had the opportunity to meet Kevin this past weekend. He was at a show here in Maryland, a convention.
I bet he loved you, man.
He really is. Like, it's not a gimmick. He really is just a cool guy. Like, he's very down to earth, nonchalant, but he still gave me some good advice as being a big guy, because I don't really get around many big guys who have been at that level. I've had the opportunity to meet Kane, who was one of my favorites as well. But Kevin Nash was always my favorite. He was the first person I saw when I turned on WCW in 1998, And I was like, that's, like, oh my God, like that's, just larger than life. Just the persona, the charisma, like just his whole aura, just really attracted me to wrestling. And I try to base a lot of my moveset, my character off of, like the big sexy character, the Diesel character. Other guys I love watching, and a little bit, I caught the tail end of Psycho Sid's career when he was in WCW, when he was Sid Vicious. I loved watching him. I go back and watch old videos of him, who I also met this weekend. Really nice guy. I also, Kane Undertaker, obviously. Kane, I always gravitated to it. Thought Kane was awesome. Just could move. Probably one of the most agile, mobile big men of all time. Undertaker, obviously, probably one of the best big men of all time. I'll watch Big Show. Yeah. Usually all the big guys I really like to watch. Those were the ones I kind of honed in on when I was younger. And I was just always a fan of everything. I never, besides Nash, I never like pinpointed like that's my favorite guy. That's my favorite guy.
Okay.
I just was a really big fan of wrestling, and not just like the wrestling, but just everything that went along with it. Just like the storylines and the pageantry and the charisma and the larger than life personalities. That's what really drew me into it.
You mentioned about WCW. Were you actually on WCW side during the Monday Night Wars then?
Yes, I was. So I was all NWO over DX. I was somebody that loved WCW in the year 2000. I know everyone gave it shit.
Mate, but I've got a soft spot for it. I really do.
I thought the angles that they ran with the Millionaires Club,
the New Blood,
and I thought the Natural Born Thrillers were just looked amazing. All those guys could work, and they were in such great shape.
Dinos,
I don't know. And I thought Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff were great heels. I thought they did an awesome job. I was a big fan of the movie Ready to Rumble, and I know everyone gives David Arquette shit.
Mate, if anyone says anything bad about it, I block him. I don't care.
No, I know. I'm right there with you. So I was a huge fan of that movie. So I didn't really care about David Arquette winning the title. I was like, oh, it's great. That's pretty cool. I love DDP was another guy I always loved to watch, and somebody that I watched for promos, and kind of an inspiration too, because he didn't start until he was like 33, 34 wrestling. Yeah. He was a manager. So it's cool to see a guy like that, and make a career out of what he did. And now what he's doing is incredible as well. If not more impressive than his wrestling career, but he was another guy that and all storylines were involving DDP I was really interested in. So I was definitely, I enjoyed both, but I was more WCW over WWE when I first started watching.
So you're probably upset when they went out of business then.
Oh,
so just to talk about your academic background, because I know that you do have an academic background.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say, oh yeah, I can relate to this, but I know the listeners will be interested to hear more about this. You were pretty good at basketball. I just wanted to know what stopped you from going further in basketball. So basically,
basketball. I played basketball. I started it in sixth grade. I started playing basketball. I moved to a new town. I'm from Rhode Island, so I moved to a different town in Rhode Island and just try to make new friends. They just saw a big tall guy, and a bunch of the guys at my new school were like, you should play basketball. You're so tall. And they're like, you don't play? I'm like, no, I've never played in my life. I was never really interested in it. My dad always tried to push it to me to play, but I was just kind of like, yeah, I really wasn't into sports to begin with at this point. But then, once I was like, hey, it's a good way to meet new friends, started playing, started taking a liking to it, started watching it all the time, became a big sports fan. I wasn't ever like the most athletic guy. I was athletic enough for my size, but I had really good hands around the basket. I could catch the ball. I was able to finish real well. I was just naturally a strong kid. So and I was always tall. So, in sixth grade, for example, in sixth grade, I was already 6 feet tall. So,
the coaches loved you, mate.
Yeah. So, I was just learning the game, and, it became, hey, this is fun. I'm meeting new people. I did have a love for it. I'm not going to say I was really in love with basketball. I never was just like, this is like the greatest thing. And this is my whole, this is how I describe myself as I'm a basketball player. I never really thought of myself like that. I'm just like, hey, I play, and is this going to get me a scholarship? And I want to put everything in that I can into it. So I did. And I left my public school, which was hard because I had a lot of good friends and we had a good team. And this was in 10th grade, and I ended up going to Worcester Academy in Massachusetts for 3 years. And it's a preparatory school, and went there because like, hey, I need to play against better people because it's in the Rhode Island, public school league. The tallest guys like 6'3", 6'4". So there's no like the guys are good, but there's no college level competition.
Oh, okay.
So I went to a prep school, 3 years there, playing with guys, against guys, all going Division I. 3 years, then chose Vermont. I love Vermont, loved Vermont. It was an awesome time. I would not ever trade it for anything. Team-wise, we had an awesome career there. We went to the NCAA tournament twice, my freshman and my junior year.
Mm-hmm.
Personal-wise, I didn't have the best career that I thought I would. I was a little bit of a disappointment because just a lot of injuries piled up.
Oh, okay.
Really, and so to answer your question, long-winded as I am.
That's all right.
To answer your question, once the injuries started piling up, I kind of fell out of love totally with basketball. It turned into a job. So I just said, I'm not gonna quit. I'm gonna play this out. I've had eye, knee, ankle, back, all these injuries are starting to pile up. And I'm just like, I'm just gonna get through it. My senior year, a week before the season started, everything was going well. And then I had 2 bulging discs in my back. So I was like, I played the whole senior year at about 50% of my capacity.
At such a young age as well, man. That must have been.
I know, exactly. So, and it was my own fault. We were hang cleaning in the weight room and did it. I felt a twinge, and me thinking I was Superman. I was like, oh, look at all the weight I just pulled up at my height. That's amazing. Everyone was hyping me up. I went to go do another exercise and was just lazy as hell, picked up the weight wrong, and then, boom, there it is. Instead of listening to my body, I was trying to just do too much. So, yeah, that's me being a 22-year-old kid being an idiot. So I basically I ended it. I was like, hey, this is all I wanted out of basketball. And this is great.
Yeah.
I got my scholarship. I got a free education. I met some awesome people. I had a great time, and this is good enough. So I was like, so what I ended up doing is I took a year off. I moved back home to Rhode Island, and realized I wanted to get a graduate degree, and that's what landed me here in Maryland. I went to University of Baltimore to get a master's degree in industrial organizational psychology.
All right, fair enough. With the psychology, like I would basically ask the same question as I asked about basketball, because that's quite interesting. What made you want to do that?
So I was a psych major in college, and to be completely honest, I was just like, what can I? When I was coming into college, I was like, what can I just do to, it's not gonna be too difficult. I was always interested in it, but I wasn't like thinking like I'm gonna make a big career out of it. I was thinking when I first got there, I'm like, oh, when I finish, I want to try to coach. I want to try to coach basketball. And after I saw what the coaches go through, I was like, I do not want to coach basketball ever. I don't want to do this. So so I got a reality check with that. I thought that's what I wanted to do, and I ended up just saying no. I'll figure out what I want to do in psychology. I want to do child development. That was one thing, but then I met with a few people, and I realized IO, industrial organizational psychology, is a really good track. So I really call it advanced like human resources is really what it kind of is. So it's good. Right now it's a good steady job, so I don't mind, and it was a solid way to go. So, I got my degree in 2016, and, now I'm just still here in Maryland and working from home, which is beautiful.
And I'm glad we did get to talk about it again, because I do have a soft spot and I love Gilbert. But you mentioned that he basically saw you and assumed that you were a worker and, basically persuaded you to become a wrestler. What was the show that you went to where you did meet him?
Yeah, so it was September 2019. It was an Adrenaline Championship Wrestling show, which is James Ellsworth's promotion here in Maryland. I found out about it because I was listening to Busted Open Radio, and Enzo was on, and Enzo was talking about that he was going to be here in Maryland, and I was just like, I have nothing to do tonight, so you know what? I'm just going to go. I haven't been to an indie show in a while, so I'm going to go check it out. It was a solid show. I had a really good time. Met some awesome people. Now I'm part of it, which is really cool. And was, able to start training that next day and get the ball rolling.
I can imagine you get a lot of comparisons just because you mentioned Enzo to Big Cass.
Yeah,
I can imagine you get
so
that
when I walked in, that's what was funny. When I walked in, all of a sudden people started turning their heads. So they were like looking like, wait, is that? I'm like, oh no, it's not. Yeah, so they were all like kind of like, I guess saw eyes, and that happens everywhere. When I walk around, people are just always looking at me.
Yeah.
Ellsworth's favorite joke whenever we walk in anywhere, and it just, people are just always surprised and they don't get it. He'll always say, we'll go to a hostess, say we walk in a restaurant, he'll just be like, so one of us pinned the world champ and the other's him, and he'll point to me, and the waitress is like, wait, what? Or he'll say like, which one of us pinned the world champ? And she'll just like look, and like I look, point to me. Like, yeah, no, not him.
But if I pinned AJ Styles like multiple times on TV, I would shut up about it.
They get a he doesn't shut up about it, but rightfully so. He gets a kick out of that one. He's usually the only one laughing. I'm just like shaking my head most of the time.
Not again.
Yeah, I know, all the time.
Where did you train to become a wrestler? I know you mentioned about Ellsworth being a mentor, but I just want to know specifically, because of your height, was there anything difficult that you found training?
So I was always an athlete, so a lot of the movement. The biggest thing with people trying to learn how to become a wrestler, and what sets certain people apart from like moving forward pretty quick, is just knowing how to move your body in space. Coming from basketball, I knew how to do that. Some people, they'll watch wrestling, they'll be like, oh, I can do that, and they get in a ring and they take the first bump, or like learning. So for an example, learning how to bump. I tell people that are athletes, it's easy to explain. It's a hip hinge. You hip, and then you kind of explode your hips forward and throw yourself backward, and throw your feet up and try to land as high on your upper back, but not your neck as possible. So it's like a deadlift where you're hinging your hips and you're popping through. People that have never been an athlete or don't understand that, don't understand that movement. Okay, there you go. So it's hard to explain just basic movements.
Yeah.
There's a guy training right now. He was a football player at Towson, and it's coming quicker to him than it was for other people. And I'll see people at training kind of get discouraged, like, oh, I've been here a year longer than this guy, and he's picking it up. It's like, well, just because he's an athlete and he knows. He's like, all you have to do is tell him one thing, and he's like, I know how to do this. I know how to pivot on my right foot. I know how to hit the ropes and make sure my right foot's leading. I know how to hinge at my hips and throw myself backwards. I'm strong enough to get up off of a roll when you're rolling in the ring and stand up on my feet. I can do all that type of stuff, and it doesn't look awkward.
But you're saying that it now makes sense with JR's sort of philosophy. He used to always have a thing for like people with the American football background.
Yes.
So like that, this basically would make it out that they were a lot easier to train. So now that you've said that, it makes a lot more sense. Yeah.
So I mean, obviously, amateur wrestlers have the easiest transition over to wrestling. At least when it comes to mat skills, they know how to maneuver themselves and do all the technical type stuff. Other athletes, such as like basketball or football players, we do have footwork, so we know how to kind of move around a little bit. It's always going to be different. Still a lot of footwork to learn. We don't come in being an expert by any means, because ring positioning is really important, and it's something that's continued learning. So where I train is with a independent wrestler. His name is Nick Taylor. He goes by Sickened on the independent circuit. He was actually trained by Ruckus. A lot of people know Ruckus is kind of like an independent wrestling legend on the East Coast here, from Baltimore, but he was part of that when CZW was at its height in like the early 2010s. He was part of that like movement when the guys like Moxley were coming up. He was part of that crew, and just kind of that like real extreme style post ECW.
Like there are no limits of what we do.
Yeah, no, he's unbelievable. Ruckus, his name's Claude Morrow. His real name goes by Ruckus, and he's known everywhere. He was part of a group called Blackout, which had guys like Eddie Kingston was his tag partner for a long time. So they're very well known here on the East Coast, and he's been world traveled, gone to Japan, gone to Europe, gone to a ton of different places. So Nick is a disciple of Ruckus. So learning from him, I know it's coming from I know everything he's telling me is coming from a good place, because Ruckus was trained so well. And obviously Ellsworth was trained by Axel Rotten, and Axel Rotten is known in the wrestling community, as one of He was one of the greatest minds in wrestling. People knew him as a hardcore guy, but he wasn't just a hardcore guy. He knew wrestling really well. And Ellsworth always told a story about when he was in WWE, and Paul Heyman would always come up to him and say, you know, I loved Axel. Like, he was so smart, and just unfortunately not as many people really knew how smart he was to the business. So just seeing that, I know that like learning from Ellsworth is really great for my development growth.
And I just want to ask as well, because you've been in OVW, which is now run by Al Snow these days. And Al Snow met him actually just before the pandemic, and he was like, couldn't be any nicer. It's not about me. But the point that I was going to make is basically about OVW. What was it like, basically going down there?
Yeah, so it definitely was surreal walking into OVW and kind of being like, wow, you know, I'm just thinking about the people that have been here before. Obviously, the John Cena's and the Lesnar and Orton and Shelton Benjamin, Batista, like, you know, list goes on. Yeah, it really is. That class, you know, is probably one of the best training classes that WWE may ever have, just based on success for all those guys. And of course, Cornette. I'm a big fan of Jim Cornette. So like,
love his podcast. I listen to it every day.
Yeah, it's the best. It really is. So, and I always say to people, like, you know, I'm like, you know, you don't always have to agree with him, but he just, everything he says, just, it's entertaining. It's comedy.
Yeah. Is that like, I don't agree with everything he says, but like, you know, he's entertaining. Like, he's out of touch, but like, he does know it as well.
No, he does. Yeah, and you can't deny his knowledge. He's been with some of the best workers in the business. He's been around it so long. He trained that class at OVW, and look at the success they had. You know, so you can't deny what he's done. But yeah, going into OVW really was cool. You know, being in the ring, just kind of trying to take it all in and be like, damn, this is really, really awesome. And the experience was great, and everybody couldn't have been nicer. Al was awesome to talk to. Al's very, very, very so smart as well in the business. He's definitely one of the best trainers, known as one of the best trainers in the world. Yeah. So he's given me some pointers, and I'm spending time with him. So a lot of fun getting down there. Been down there twice. I'm going down there again June 3rd and 4th. So really excited about that.
No, wicked, man. I will ask about your future plans when I do talk about the interview, but I do have a few more questions because I'm annoyed. Because Grimm's Toy Show has such a huge following. I haven't really sort of paid too much attention to it because sort of my time is limited these days. But I'm dead certain that the listeners out there will want to know basically how much fun do you have doing those shows, and what is it? Why does it have the following that it has?
Honestly. So he's been doing, obviously he started with like the action figures, you know, and he built his following off that. It's a blast, Grimm's Toy Show. GTS really is it's a fun place to go. And the thing is people do call it backyard wrestling because it is in someone's backyard. However, majority of the guys there are trained, guys and girls, they are trained in wrestling, and we are all, especially some of the best people there. Majority of the people are trained professionally to wrestle. So it's not a backyard show. This isn't just, Grimm doesn't have anybody there that can't work. So he's very, he makes sure that he vets people. And like, if he finds out that he'll invite people, it's like, hey, you can come like hang out and be around the ring, but I'm not going to put you in the ring if I know you can't work. Grimm was actually trained by Kurt Hawkins, Brian Myers.
Was he?
Yeah, he was. So he started wrestling. And then people were kind of saying like, oh, you know, he's not good, all this. So he's like, you know what, I'm going to get officially like professionally trained. And he went to train at Create a Pro with Brian Myers. So
some of the best they produce as well, man, like MJF.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's one of the best on the East Coast. And I was telling people that recently. And if I lived up there, I'd definitely take advantage of it. But going to Grimm's, it's a great atmosphere. It's very like family atmosphere. Everyone there is really cool. Haven't had a bad time there. I wish I was a little closer. I'd go more often, but you know, time constraints make it tough, and work makes it tough sometimes. But what he's been able to do with that show and the following he's been able to build off of that show really is remarkable. It just shows how entertaining he is. He really turns it on when the cameras are on, and he's done such a good job. He puts out content every single day. He's always putting a video out.
Like everyone looks like they're just having fun, like from what I've seen.
They are, and you know, it's more organized than people think. He gets everyone there. He gets his stuff in. He gets it all, and he has enough. He has enough footage. He tries to film at least twice a week, and he has enough footage to really put out every single day, and it's remarkable. It really is. He is. I really, I mean, to be completely honest, his show is one of the most watched wrestling shows on YouTube, and it gets a ton of views. They've had
huge numbers,
million view videos. You know, Ellsworth's been a part of a few of those, so it is it's a cool like, you know, company to be a part of, GTS, because it does give you a different subset of fans that, you know, are really diehard. And I'll go to shows and people come up to me, mostly kids, you know, they'll come up to me and they'll say, like, I see you on GTS. Oh, I love you on GTS and all this stuff. And you know, it helps merch sales. It helps all that type of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, it's worth it. You know, it'll sometimes get a bad rep because, you know, it is in a backyard and people think it's, you know.
I can't imagine like Jim Cornette giving you a thumbs up for it, but
no, probably not.
But wrestling can be fun though, man. Like
he wouldn't love it, but again, you know, it's fun, and I always say, hey, you know, I never had a bad time up there, so I always like going back whenever I can. And you know, I think Grim's just a great guy, so I think, you know, I really hope he can continue this on in the future.
That's great, man. I did have to ask that because I know a few listeners definitely want to know about him.
Yeah,
but even I know about it, and I have seen it in the background sometimes. So I want to ask as well. So, what is it about the '80s classic Big Trouble in Little China that's influenced you to use it as sort of a wrestling name and the merchandise scene? I'm not just saying it, like, I'm not saying it in the bad way, by the way, because I fucking love that film. I used to watch it on repeat because I'm a lot older than you may think. But I just want to elaborate for the listeners who may not even be aware of the film, which I'm ashamed of to have you as a listener. Please explain.
Yeah, so I've always been a fan of like really like cheap 80s movies. John Carpenter is one of my favorite directors. I love, and Kurt Russell is one of my favorite actors. So watching you know, Big Trouble, of course, They Live with Roddy Piper, watching Escape from New York, Escape from LA, all the John Carpenter films I've always been a huge fan of. And when I was trying to come up with a character, I always told everybody, like, I don't want to be the big brooding, you know, like monster, like, I'm going to kill you character, because it wasn't me, and I wouldn't be able to do it justice. So I didn't want to be like the Kane. I didn't want to be like that type of character. As much as I love Kane, I didn't want it to be that prototypical, I'm big, so I'm a monster, and I'm a big dumb idiot type of character. I didn't want to do that.
Well, it's all be yourself, but amped up a little bit. Yeah,
exactly. Because I wanted to be more like a Kevin Nash, you know, to be able to talk and, you know, just like, you know, because, you know, I have the hair and, you know, almost have that like swarmy type attitude, but it's like having that lovable jerk type attitude where like I have a lot of gray area with my character where I can go face and heel depending on what's going to happen. So I was just, you know, talking with people at training one day, and a wrestler named Vic Ramone, we were talking about how much we both love that, like those type of movies. And, you know, he was really influential in helping me figure out a character. And we were just talking. He's just like, wait, why don't you just go by Big Trouble? And I'm like, oh shit, like, that sounds pretty good, you know. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, damn. And he's like, yeah, then you could just use your name and just think of a last name that begins with B. And I'm like, all right, Bishop, sure. And I picked it. I was like, whatever. And because I wanted it to be, you know, alliteration at BB, so because it sounds so good.
Yeah.
So Big Trouble, Ben Bishop. And then after that, I started thinking of other little things, like in the movie when he says, you know, quaking the earth and shaking the pillars of heaven. So I say earthquake and pillars shaking. He drives the meat. He drives the Pork Chop Express in the movie. In college, one of my teammates always used to call guys who were kind of just like big guys, always just call them meat pops. So I was like, all right, Pork Chop Express, Meat Pop Express. I'll add that to the moniker. Oh, look at that. Everybody likes acronym type names. So I'll just call myself BT Double B. So, you know, things started. I love guys like Road Dogg, and that's where I got that from. You know, DO double B, so I say BT Double B. The rhyming at the beginning, the earthquake and pillar shake, it's like limousine riding, jet flying. So because I'm like, well, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I'm not going to reinvent stuff. What worked in wrestling? What's going to make people just be like, you know, oh, I'm going to remember that.
Yeah.
The earthquake and pillar shake and leader of the Meat Pop Express. Say it quick. Say it with so much conviction. People are going to look. People are going to hear it and just be like, not going to ask questions. Just going to be like, oh wow, I remember that. You know, the Rock, jabroni beating pie eating. He just says it so quick that it's like, I'm not going to ask. We all know what it means, but he's going to. We're not going to continue to. We're not going to sit here and be like questioning it because he's like, oh, he says it so confidently with so much conviction. So I wanted something like that where I can have a ton of different little like catchphrases and people, you know, give me shit about it and call me like Captain Catchphrase. And I'm like, you know what though? What gets over? You know, and it's easy. I can add it now, so I'm adding more to it. You know, the sun never sets on a cool guy. I got that now. The top of the dude chain. I got that. So I just throw a shit ton of stuff at people. Get ready because here comes trouble. I just try to have so many different like little things that are just people can be like, that's so ridiculous and dumb, but it's repeatable and you can say it. It'll be catchy.
What you're saying is literally like music to my ears, because I think, yeah, good wrestling's important, but a character as well. It is becoming a bit of a lost art.
It's the most important thing in wrestling. You go back and you look, and the best example is Stone Cold. When he was stunning Steve Austin, he was a great technical wrestler, and he had some awesome matches, but he was a mid-card guy at best, and he was never going to be that main event talent. And it showed because he got fired from WCW. But then when he went to WWE and became Stone Cold Steve Austin, and all he did was punch and kick and Luthez press and hit people with a stunner, even the most over guy in the history of the business. So, and same thing with Hulk Hogan. When Hulk Hogan was doing all that type of stuff, when he was in Japan, he was doing the arm drags and the technical wrestling and whatever. I mean, he was a big guy, so he got over because of his size, but it wasn't until the Hulkamania and the say your prayers and eat your vitamins and that type of stuff. That's what got over. And he just did a big boot and punches and kicks, and it wasn't anything that was.
But he made so much money and
he made so much money.
Probably is the biggest name in wrestling history
because he's the character. And Kevin Nash can say the same thing about too.
Yeah.
If the technical wrestling, and I have so much respect for guys, especially you being in the UK, that a lot of guys like the William Regals and the Robbie Brooksides who come from the UK and how talented they are. It is amazing, that type of catch style wrestling, what guys can do. And it has a place, don't get me wrong. However, what gets over is characters. And Regal got over with an amazing character he had in the early 2000s in the WWE.
Yep.
The commissioner character, and it was it just people are going to remember that. They're not going to remember as much how good of a wrestler he was. People know that, but they'll remember that.
But they'll remember the commissioner and the Tajiri.
Yeah, remember the segments.
Drinking tea and stuff.
See, so that's what's important. And I always say, like, if the technical wrestling was the most important part of pro wrestling, we would see a professional amateur wrestling league, and there would be we would see that, and they would be making a ridiculous amount of money. However, it's not. So you gotta have a character. You gotta be just larger than life in this business. You can't. Luckily, I'm literally and figuratively larger than life. So you gotta be able to. How are you going to set yourself apart? Yeah, I'm big, but there are guys that are my size too. But how am I going to be different from them? I got to do something different. Like I said, I didn't want to be the big monster.
I mean, if you want to start, that's another thing as well. Like men that sort of larger than life. Sort of one criticism I may have. I love Keith Lee to bits, but I think he does some moves when he shouldn't, like high fly moves. I think he does it over the top. There are things that you need to sort of go back, and I think character is so important, and people forget that.
That's what people are going to remember. A perfect example. Another example is The Miz. Like watching The Miz and what he does. Watching guys like Dolph Ziggler. He doesn't high fly very often, but he sells and he does the little things. And he has his character. The Miz has his character. He doesn't get on the top rope and do all these things that guys his size do. But he's able to get over because of his character and his promo and how convincing he is. It's just that those are the things that are going to, one, get you over, and two, keep you in the business as long as possible. Because if you're taking these crazy bumps and the athleticism for people to do that, like, it's remarkable. And respect to people that are able to do it, but you're not going to be around as long. Your body, no one's a superhero, and your body's not going to be able to withstand doing this type of moves all the time. So one guy, Ruckus told Nick, my trainer, because Nick said one time, he's like, I want to do a 450 splash as my finisher. So what Ruckus told him, he's like, okay, do you want that to be your finisher? He's like, yeah. He's like, well, you're gonna have to do it every night, and sometimes you're gonna have to miss it, and that move hurts when you miss it, and even when you hit it, it hurts. He's like, if you have to do that every single night, it's gonna take weeks and months and years off your wrestling career. But if you want to do it every now and then it will be cool. Undertaker, look at him at WrestleMania. He does the big dive over the top rope.
Yep.
Because it was cool. And it was like, I'm only going to do it once a year, and people are going to remember it. And it's going to be played over and over again for years to come. But if he was doing it every night, it'd be like, nah, it's just one of his moves. So it's really, at the end of the day, people try to make this complex. It's not. It's simple, and it's just such a simple formula to wrestling.
Sometimes less is better.
Not just sometimes, George. I'm telling you, I think less is more all the time in professional wrestling, and you got to know, and that's what Ellsworth has been so good at. To put him over for a second, he is able to read the crowd. He learned this from Cena too when he was there. Cena has been so good at doing that, and through a match, just calling the match and saying when they got to hit certain things because of how the crowd's reacting.
Yeah,
because that's the most important thing. If the crowd, you can call a match in the back and talk to people about it, but however, when you get out there and you're losing the crowd, it's time to figure something out. Either go home or you got to do something, because it's hey, we got to figure out a way to either condense this or do something different because we're losing them. They're not into it. So Cena, he always says Cena was the best at that and figuring out when to do certain things and get so the crowd stayed hot the whole time.
That's what I love about this podcast, and I know some people in the comments may disagree. That's fair enough. I absolutely do not mind that. Everyone's got their opinion, but I absolutely agree with you, and I'm not just saying it for brownie points or just for the sake of it. I genuinely do believe it, and I do think psychology in terms of character work and promos and catchphrases has become a bit of a lost art, and I think that's why a lot of people are really loving Roman Reigns' new character, the head of the table. If you watch his matches, he isn't necessarily doing a lot of moves. The storytelling, he's got the head of the table and the tribal chief. He's got catchphrases and
facial expressions. All his facial expressions are just incredible, and that character, it's just him. You can tell it's him. It's this makes sense. This what he's been missing. It just looks so good, and obviously he's a great looking guy, and his body is amazing, and he looks like a champion. And you can buy it, and he has that just nonchalant attitude, but then he gets vicious when he wants to be, and he's the best. I think he's the best thing in wrestling going right now.
I agree. I've been putting on Twitter, and a lot of people have been fine agreeing.
He's doing a great job. I'm happy he finally found, because he's such a great talent, and I'm happy he finally found his niche that's working for him.
It's kind of sad in a way, but it took a pandemic for this character to develop and for him to shine. But
I know.
To wrap this up, I have basically 2 more questions, and I shall let you enjoy the rest of your day. So basically, what is it like being managed by Brandon Walker from the Barstool Sports? I'm not too familiar myself, but I know him endorsing you is a big deal, and the listeners would like to hear more about your relationship with him.
Yeah, so it's really not a long story about how we got started. He just put on Twitter one day that he always wanted to be a wrestling manager, and I said he can manage me, and we just got to talking, and working with Brandon's been awesome. Really good guys. What you see is what you get. Brandon's kind of just Brandon, but he's also a guy who turns his personality up to 11 when he's on camera. He really is passionate about wrestling. It's not just a gimmick with him. He loves professional wrestling. He grew up in Mississippi in the Memphis territory, and always went to the matches and watched the Jerry Lawlers and the Bill Dundees and those guys back in the day, and fell in love with it from there. So we've done a ton of stuff. He's coming with me to OVW in June 3rd and 4th, so we're going to link up then. And he's a busy guy. His Barstool obviously comes first, and I respect that. I let him know when I have stuff available and if he wants to join. And promoters are real excited right now to use him because of his following and the Barstool following. So it's definitely been it's a whirlwind and trying to figure out his schedule. But 4 kids, he's a busy, and like I said, very busy guy. So we're going to try to do as much as we can this summer. He's really invested into doing OVW, so I'm excited about that. We're going to have a good time down there. Matt Jones of KSR, Kentucky Sports Radio, just bought a large portion of OVW, and he's just doing a lot of big things with it. So that's really exciting. So we're going to have some fun down there. And hopefully it continues. It was really cool to get to the office. He invited me up to the Barstool HQ. Pretty surreal. I'm from New England, so I've always followed Barstool. Not always religiously, but it was always there, and I always knew of it. And
about it though, yeah.
What Dave Portnoy has been able to do with that company is just nothing short of remarkable. So all the respect to him. Met him, was pretty funny meeting him, because I was just sitting at his desk, and Roan, I was talking to Roan, and Dave came over and started talking to Roan, and I was like, well, I guess I got to introduce myself. I'm just sitting here, So I stood up, and he kind of looked me up and down, like, what the hell? Like, who the hell is this? and I just towered over him, and I was like, hey, I'm Ben. I'm actually the wrestler that Brandon Walker's managing. And he just laughed. He's like, honestly, I had no idea that was happening. But he's like, "Hey, pleasure to meet you." So he's a nice guy. Another guy, what you see is what you get with him. And everyone there, Big Cat, great guy, PFT, awesome guy. I really can't say a bad thing about anyone. It was a cool experience getting up there a few times.
That's awesome, man. So you seem to have your head screwed on. Talking to you today has been really good. I have to also give Ellsworth credit for this because he mentioned you. Then I basically did actually follow him up on his advice, and now I have you on the show. And it's been a pleasure speaking to you. So, what is next for Big Trouble Ben Bishop?
What is next? Well, here
I know you've mentioned about OVW, but
OVW,
what else?
We have a ton of other places. A couple places that people really should be following. Obviously, Ellsworth's promotion, Adrenaline Championship Wrestling. Hopefully, we're going to be streaming some stuff soon, so people everywhere can watch. But if anyone's ever in the Maryland area, that's always a great show to go to. He has some great names that come and some awesome talent that's already there, including myself. And other places in New Jersey that I've been working for, Invictus Pro Wrestling, Global Syndicate Wrestling. Two young promotions have just started during the pandemic. But they're going to blow up pretty soon because of just they're run correctly. Excuse me. That's one of the big things in this business is that a lot of places, you got to find the right companies to work for. You got to find the right feds to work for because there are, the term is shindy, and that means shitty indie. So, and you don't, and Ellsworth always says it, if you can be great, but if you're rolling around in shit, you become shit. And it's said with any type of sport, right? Yeah. So if you're working with guys who are just subpar or not good, and you're never going to get better. Yeah. So, I like these type of companies, these guys who run Invictus, who run GSW, I can tell that they have their heads screwed on straight. They understand booking and wrestling, and they're learning along the way. They won't say they're experts at it, but they're doing good by everyone on the show so far. Very professional. Voltage Wrestling in West Virginia, I'm going to get involved with as well. A couple other ones scattered about. There's a ton that I can go over. I'm actually making my Rhode Island debut. Being from Rhode Island, I'm really excited about that. So making a debut at New World Wrestling Extremes. That'll be fun. So I get to have a lot of friends and family come to that show, which is going to be awesome at the end of July. But if anybody wants to follow me, just please, I'm always talking about where I'm going to be with promos and everything. At Big Trouble BB on Twitter, on Instagram. That's where I usually post the most. So follow me on there. I make every time I have something coming up, I'm always talking about it. So it's going to be a busy few months, but I'm excited about that. My goal and really what I'm trying to do, and I've talked to Ellsworth about it. My goal is hopefully by the end of the year, I am getting opportunities with like the Ring of Honors or the AEWs or the Impact Wrestling and that type of place where I can really start to build my name up a little bit more. Because it's really important. I'm already 31. I don't have a ton of time. Right now I've got to start doing it now. I did have a tryout with the WWE back in February. So that was a great experience. Got the thanks, but no thanks. And that's okay. Some great guys, haven't gotten their first time. Keith Lee, guys like that. So I'm not too bummed about it. It was a cool experience getting to meet.
Just giving you more motivation, really.
Exactly. More motivation and knowing what to work on. And I got plenty to work on. I'll admit it. I am not close to where I need to be. I need to continue to get better. Getting in better shape, which I've been really focusing on. That's one thing. And, of course, getting better in the ring. So that's my goal for 2021 and hopefully to really hit 2022 hard because really wrestling, all it is, it's a bunch of hills. You get the first hill, the basics and the training, and, you get over that hill and then, you hit that valley. It's like, okay, I'm getting all these bookings. Everything's great. But now, it's time I want to get to the next level. So now it's time to pick it up again. And if you sit at that valley and you start getting complacent and like, oh, everyone thinks I'm a man at this indie and FPWC and CW3 and FT2 and whatever, all the acronyms that you can throw together. And you're like, oh, I'm the champion here, and here, which doesn't, at the end of the day, I'm sorry, I'll break kayfabe, doesn't matter. So, what matters is the big championships. You want to get to the big time, the big level. That's when it counts to count. And that's where the money is. So that's where I want to get to. I want to eventually get to that point. And, it's great to win those championships. It's great to be recognized as like somebody that like they feel comfortable to put their title on, and I respect all companies that do that. But, you know, I want to get better in the ring. That's what I want to do. That's my main focus for the rest of 2021. Better in the ring, better character, better shape. And there's really no stopping. Like I'm going to, you know, give this 110% like I give basketball. I'm actually in love with pro wrestling. So I'll give it even more. Maybe I'll give it 115%. We'll see if that's physically possible. But I am going to, yeah. So really, if anybody, people that are listening, you know, just seriously, follow me. If you ever want to reach out to me, please do, because I talk to everybody. I'm never going to like big time you or, you know, that's not how I am. So I'm very, very friendly person. Even if I'm playing a heel, I'll break character and be nice to you. So yeah, no, I'm really excited, George. It's going to be an awesome few months. Real positive and looking forward to seeing what comes out of it.
That's good, man. I absolutely respect your goals, and I know you're going to achieve them and even go further. I will put the details of where the fans can follow you on social media, as you mentioned on Twitter. Yeah. Thank you for coming on today. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. It's been great, man. But I've really enjoyed today. For everyone that has listened to this episode, stay tuned for my sponsors, and that is coming up right now.